Good afternoon, I'm Giovanni Dennis with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're joining us online at onespotmedia.com. There has been an increase in calls for amendments to be made to the Criminal Justice Act, which includes that of plea bargaining. The cries have grown louder since the body of 20-year-old Kenise Jackson was found last Friday. But this afternoon, strong opposition from at least 3 attorneys who argue the legislation must not be touched. O'Shane Masters reports.
A national crisis. That's how Attorney at Law Isaac Buchanan has described the crime situation plaguing the island. His comment comes following the gruesome murders of women over the last few years. The latest is that of 20-year-old accounting clerk Kenise Jackson in Portmore, St. Catherine. The suspect in that case, 50-year-old Robert Fowler, is to face the courts on April 9. But in Parliament on Tuesday, Member of Parliament for North East St. Catherine, Carencia Morrison, called for changes to the Criminal Justice Act, which allows reduction in sentences of up to 50% for people who plead guilty for certain crimes. But 3 attorneys, Isaac Buchanan, Bert Samuels, and Peter Champagny, say there should be no amendments to the Act.
The amendments of the Criminal Justice Administration Act, which brought in the 50%, was done with mature consideration. It was an adoption of what takes place in first world countries. So if the message you are sending is that Jamaicans are more barbaric than persons who commit serious crimes in other countries, that would be unfortunate.
It must be on a case-by-case basis. I know that we are now venting because of the recent attack on women. However, I don't like when we shape our laws around crises. I'm not in support of any interference with the plea bargaining system because it has nuances which are unknown to lay people, and sometimes the prosecution is getting a conviction, as it were, in a situation where they couldn't.
Queen's Counsel Peter Champagny says under the law, there is currently no entitlement of a 50% discount in the sentence of a murderer during plea bargaining.
It doesn't mean, therefore, that it will be automatic that someone who pleads guilty in those circumstances would get 50% discount. There are many instances where persons plead guilty at the most reasonable opportunity and they are considered proper candidates for a 50% discount, but the sentencer, that is the judge, does not give a 50% based on the aggravating features.
It's why Mr. Champagny says sentencing is not as simplistic as a normal man thinks. For attorney Bert Samuels, there are also nuances which may not be understood. One such, he says, is that of a co-accused in a murder case giving information on the principal or prime suspect in a murder and getting a reduced sentence. In some jurisdictions, impact assessments are given by the family during the sentencing of the perpetrator. This includes how the death of a loved one has negatively impacted the family, which is then taken into consideration and added or not to the number of years a criminal will get.
In Jamaica, they are not by tradition and by law allowed to testify about what it has done to them. The judge has to, look at them and assess whether it has destroyed the family. So from the family is not part of our jurisprudence.
But Mr. Champagny says some local courts have allowed statements from the family.
The recent case involving the Queen against Dante Brooks and Andre Hines was one such example where the court took into account the statement of the father of the deceased. So the issues and the principles in terms of sentencing and, more importantly, giving a voice to the relatives of the victim is being considered.
O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
In the meantime, Mr. Champagny is suggesting areas he believes legislative adjustments could be made to deal with the island's crime problem.
I think that the focus really should be on a call for there to be stiffer penalties in terms of victims of crimes who are children, who are senior citizens, or who are the most vulnerable in terms of mentally challenged, and women. And in those circumstances, perhaps what needs to be looked at is a situation where there is a mandatory minimum for those most vulnerable amongst us who are the victims of crimes. That is where I think, respectfully, the debate ought to be.
A month after the Ministry of Health launched a probe into the death of 17-year-old Jalissa Magowan, her mother, Narda McCoy, says she is yet to be informed of the outcome. Speaking with our news center after visiting the funeral home on Tuesday, Mrs. McCoy said that she was expecting the findings to be ready.
Who are you going to hold accountable for this? Because it's like it's a 9-day thing and them things say just sweep and it gone, it not gone, it not coming now. Let's go so, you know. But not letting it go like this. I think I'm to nobody else. No more pretty enough yes. Go through this. No more mothers have to feel a pain. They got one nice pain. So what are they doing? What is the government doing about this? Nothing.
Earlier this month, Minister of Health Dr. Christopher Tufton ordered an investigation. He said action would be taken based on the outcome of the probe. On March 5, it was reported that the University Hospital of the West Indies completed its report on Jalissa's case. Her family says she was taken to the hospital during an asthma attack on February 26, but was turned away due to space challenges. The teenager later died at the Andrews Memorial Hospital. Now, CEO of the University Hospital, Kevin Allen, told our news center the report was sent to the Ministry of Health in keeping with a directive from Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton. Amendments to the Disaster Risk Management Act to institute penalties for COVID-19 breaches have cleared the final hurdle. The government last evening used its majority to pass the amendments. Codian Barrett reports.
The opposition had previously raised concern about the sweeping powers being given to the Prime Minister to create offences which could lead to criminal penalties. While speaking in Parliament yesterday, Attorney General Marlene Malahoo Fort sought to address those concerns.
That regulations, which under the Interpretation Act includes an order, and also set out here for the avoidance of doubt, that any offence that is created pursuant to a regulation, in that case, the executive order, which would not have come to the House, would not form part of the criminal record. So the concern is addressed without doing harm to the other provisions.
But opposition leader Mark Golding still had issues with the bill, particularly in relation to amendments made by the Senate, which he suggested reversed changes, which made it clear offences based on orders by the Prime Minister would not appear on a person's criminal record.
You have to
the concern I had was to do with the orders made by the Prime Minister, which can create criminal offences without parliamentary approval. The way in which that has been achieved in the bill is by Section 52(1)(c), which says that a measure under an order made under Section 26, which is the orders made by the Prime Minister, is now a criminal offence. It is that one which should not, in my view, create a criminal record on the offender. I understood that to have been accepted, but I'm not sure now whether it is or it isn't. But from our point of view, the way it has been done by the Attorney General is defective, and we will not support it.
After several rounds of debate with the government insisting the changes by the Senate would not lead to persons having criminal records, Deputy House Speaker Gillette Holness put the matter to a vote. 34 members of Parliament voted yes. When the amendments are enacted, there will be a $5,000 fine for not wearing a mask in public and $10,000 for breaking the curfew. The fine for unlawful church services and funerals will be $100,000. On the higher end, hotels could be charged $500,000 for breaches. Codian Barrett, TVJ News.
The University Hospital of the West Indies is appealing to volunteers and retired nurses for assistance in tackling the high number of COVID-19 cases. This following the shortage of nurses coupled with the increased patients and limited bed space at the facility. Sandy Williams reports.
Just last month, the University Hospital of the West Indies, UHWI, had to issue a statement urging the public, private medical practitioners, and other hospitals referring patients to make contact before transferring patients to the facility. The spike in COVID-19 cases has resulted in limited bed spaces. Now the hospital has another challenge to contend with, a critical shortage of nurses. This means that patient care at the facility is on the verge of collapse, and the risk of errors by staff under pressure is likely to increase. It's why head of the Department of Anesthesia and Critical Care at the hospital, Dr. Kelvin Metola, has been pleading for more nurses and volunteers to help tackle the increase in patients at the facility combined with loss of staff. Up to Tuesday, Dr. Metola reached out publicly to retired nurses and persons with nursing skills to contact the facility immediately to offer assistance. He says for the hospital to maintain operating standards, the shortage will have to be addressed or there could be unintended consequences.
When you are demanding the highest level and the highest quality of care from staff and there is significant shortage, then you run a risk of burnout, you run a risk of accident, you run a risk of people becoming infected, you run a risk of frustration, desperation. I mean, patients will end up getting care late. So these are some of the things we're talking about, where, when there is such a huge cry for appeal to say, listen, we need help in every area, but this evening I'm speaking specifically to nursing.
According to Dr. Metola, the Ministry of Health is aware of the challenge and is working to address the matter. However, the need for additional nurses at the facility is urgent.
We're probably talking about at least anything between 60 to 80 nurses. We need them as soon as possible. The ministry is well aware of the problem. All the various, they're doing their best in terms of reaching out to various areas, but they're well aware of the problems. These things take time. Even when you go into bilateral arrangements, it takes time to work these things through, which is why we're reaching out to Jamaica.
The hospital can be contacted at 876-541-1043 or 876-541-1044. There are currently more than 400 people hospitalized with COVID-19 in Jamaica. Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
389 new cases of the coronavirus were recorded on Tuesday. The number of confirmed cases now stands at 39,237. Kingston and St. Andrew recorded most of the new cases with 95, followed by St. Catherine with 61 and Westmoreland with 42. Meanwhile, 476 persons remain in hospital. 39 are critically ill. There are 20,779 active cases. In the meantime, 9 more Jamaicans have died from COVID-19. These include 2 each from St. Elizabeth, 2 from Westmoreland, and 2 from St. Catherine, 1 each from Kingston and St. Andrew, Portland, and St. Mary. And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when you return. Welcome back. We're continuing the news. A top-level investigation has been launched into the murder of Police Constable Jermaine Bennett, the 36-year-old constable attached to the Kingston Central Police Division. The incident took place about 11 o'clock in Gregory Park, St. Catherine on Tuesday night. A 16-year-old student of the Midday High School in Manchester has been hospitalized after being shot yesterday afternoon. It's understood that the teen was among 4 people at a shop in Newhall district in the parish when a man walked in and started firing wildly. The teen ran off to escape the attack but was hit in the upper back. The incident happened shortly after 5 o'clock. It's not clear at this time the health status of the teen. The Clarendon police have taken 5 males into custody following an armed robbery in Palmer's Cross last evening. The police received a call around 6 o'clock that a robbery was taking place. According to the police, the suspects were later picked up during an operation along the Hayes Main Road.
Acting upon intelligence, they intercepted a white Toyota Axio motor vehicle along the Hayes Main Road in the vicinity of the Jamalco plant. There were 5 male occupants on board, 2 of whom were below 18 years old.
The police searched the vehicle where 2 guns were recovered, among other items.
Inside the vehicle were 2 Smith & Wesson 9mm pistols with 2 magazines, each containing 9 rounds. There were also a quantity of goods and an undetermined sum of cash.
3 schools are now the beneficiaries of tablets which were procured from funds raised at this year's staging of the National Leadership Prayer Breakfast. 2 of the institutions are from Westmoreland, namely Karen Coran Primary and Caledonia All-Age and Infant School, and also the Tranquility Primary School located in Portland. These devices have become extremely important as the nation's schools have gone online due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 30 tablets were handed out in total. Now, Principal of Caledonia All-Age and Infant, Anastasia Garrison, says while the 12 tablets her school has received is not adequate to meet the demand of her students, it's a step in the right direction.
Currently, at this time, we would have had maybe about 40% of our students who are out without a tablet. They have a device, but it would not be a tablet. It would be a parent's phone or something like that. In terms of connectivity, while there is Wi-Fi in the area, not many students have access. And when I say not many, we have about 40% of our students who have accessibility to Wi-Fi in that area. The other students are dependent on data for accessing their classroom. However, because of financial choices or lack of finances, they're unable to get onto the online platform on a regular and a day-to-day basis. So connectivity is a problem in the area that we are currently in.
Still on education, the surge in COVID-19 cases across the island has forced schools into lockdown, and with CXC exams around the corner, principals and teachers are raising concerns about students who are experiencing challenges with completing their school-based assessments SBAs. President of the Jamaica Association of Principals of Secondary Schools, Linvern Wright, is calling for something to be done to address the matter.
I think as a region, we have really allowed CXC, who is the examining body, to determine too much what is happening in terms of how we deal with the curriculum. Because to me, it is whether or not you complete that should determine whether you do exams. Because the exam really is a culmination of your work with the curriculum. What we are behaving now is that the curriculum is supposed to match up with the examinations. And many people don't understand it because we have that kind of culture.
Mr. Wright is also of the belief that CXC is given too much power with regards to how exams are administered. President of the Jamaica Teachers Association, Jasford Gabriel, says the current situation will negatively affect schools in rural areas which are still suffering from poor internet connectivity. And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In the next edition of the Health Report, we'll look at rhinitis.
So we need to understand that some persons, that's all that's happening. If they don't have a fever, they're not clinically unwell, they don't have any sore throat, they don't have any diarrhea, there's no history of exposure. These are generally well persons who just have a stuffy nose and have some irritation to the lining of their nose. So we need to understand and appreciate that that is something that is still possible.
That's the Health Report this evening in Primetime News. And now for today's healthy living tip. Know your triggers and avoid them. Don't touch or rub your nose. Wash your hands often with soap and water. And wash your...